The conference room felt like a glass cage, and I was the trapped bird. I was called into the huge, glass-walled room at Apex Builders and saw all the company directors sitting around the massive table, their faces serious. Marcus, my boss, stood at the head, looking smug and completely important. He didn't waste any time. "Jessica," he announced loudly so everyone in the huge, open office could hear, "effective immediately, you are being demoted." He then read out a long, completely made-up list of my supposed failures on our most important project, the Haven. He spoke about missed deadlines and poor leadership, things that were completely false. My humiliation burned inside me, turning quickly into a cold, hard fury. Right there, in front of everyone, he immediately gave my beautiful corner office to his smug nephew Leo. Leo sat in the chair I had earned, a little smile playing on his lips. Marcus then told me that my new office would be a small, dark basement storage room. As I packed up my years of work and personal belongings, tears of anger started to fill my eyes. I packed my desk slowly. Marcus waited until everyone else had left the room. He leaned in close, his voice a nasty, low whisper in my ear. He smelled of expensive cologne and cheap deceit. A team player knows when to keep their mouth shut. You should have taken the envelope. My new office was a cold, damp, completely dark storage room in the deepest basement of the building. It smelled strongly of dust and old concrete. My desk was a small, beaten-up folding table placed right next to a huge pile of old, useless blueprints. I sat down and let the intense humiliation of the morning sink in, watching it quickly change into a hard, focused cold fury. I started unpacking the one box of things they had allowed me to take from my old office. It was full of old pens, notebooks, and a few small personal photos. As I lifted out a heavy dictionary, something small and folded fell out from the bottom of the box. I picked it up with a shaking hand. It was a small torn piece of yellow post-it note. Written on it in small, shaky handwriting were two short, urgent sentences from a junior accountant I sometimes saw. I saw what happened at the dinner. "I'm scared. We need to talk." The note was signed with a simple, small initial, Sarah. The note was a huge, small lifeline. The dinner was where Marcus had first tried to hand me the thick, brown envelope filled with cash. The bribe I had completely refused, the bribe that had caused this entire disaster. I immediately pulled out my phone and quickly texted Sarah's number, asking her what she meant. The reply was completely immediate, and it sent a deep, cold shiver down my spine. "Don't contact this number again." I was completely alone, completely silenced, and now I knew I was in real danger. The official company statement had completely ruined my reputation, and my only witness, Sarah, had been quickly scared off. My only path to justice was to find the real evidence. I needed someone outside the company, someone I could completely trust. I immediately thought of David. David was an old, trusted friend from my law school days. He was smart, quiet, and absolutely moral. I believed he now worked for the powerful state attorney general's office, dealing with huge, important corruption cases. I quickly called him, told him only the most important parts of the terrible story, and asked him to meet me in a quiet, safe, public cafe away from the office. David met me quickly and listened to my entire story with a look of growing horror on his kind face. He was immediately furious at Marcus's arrogant cruelty. He agreed right away to help me. "Marcus is a complete fool, Jessica," David said, his voice hard. "We have to prove this isn't just a simple personal grudge. It's a huge criminal act." He then quickly reached into his expensive jacket pocket and pulled out a tiny, high-tech, state-of-the-art wire. A small microphone device the size of a tiny button. He looked me straight in the eye. "Wear this. Get him to admit it. We'll take it from there." My hands were shaking so hard I could barely put on the tight, wired shirt underneath my regular blouse. The tiny wire David had given me was perfectly hidden under my jacket lapel. I was absolutely terrified. My heart was pounding like a large drum in my chest as I walked slowly out of the dark basement and up to the shiny executive floor. I walked into Marcus's office, which had once been mine. I went there under the simple, believable guise of apologizing for my poor performance and begging to be let back into the main project. I looked him straight in the eye and started my completely fake apology. But before I could even finish my first sentence, Marcus cut me off, completely relishing his sudden, huge power. He didn't just admit to the bribe, which would have been enough evidence. He started to loudly boast. "The Haven is not supposed to succeed, Jessica," he sneered, leaning back in my old chair. "It's a completely planned failure." He explained that he was using substandard materials, cheap steel and weak concrete, that would cause the huge structure to be deemed completely condemned in 5 years. The huge construction failure would then allow them to collect a massive, complicated insurance and land grab. He was not a thief. He was a pure, cold schemer. He then smiled, a horrible, triumphant expression. "You think this is about a bribe? Jessica, this is about the future of this city. And you're either part of the foundation, or you're in the way." I left Marcus's office completely shaken, the sound of his cruel, boastful voice still ringing loudly in my ears. I quickly drove to meet David at a quiet, empty spot near the river. I immediately handed him the small, cold recording device. David listened to the audio, his face getting brighter and brighter. He was completely ecstatic about the pure, clear quality of the recording. "This is perfect, Jessica. This is not just simple bribery. This is huge, massive fraud and a serious threat to public safety," he said excitedly, his voice full of energy. The recording was exactly what he needed. But David quickly stopped smiling. He then warned me that Marcus's huge, sophisticated plans implied he had incredibly powerful allies working above him, not just simple employees. He urged me to immediately dig deeper into the actual subcontractors Marcus was using to buy the cheap, substandard materials. That evening, I went back home and started researching the company names. My laptop screen was the only light in the quiet apartment. Suddenly, a new anonymous email popped up on my screen. There was no subject line, no name, and no address. Just one single, terrifying word in all capital letters: stop. The single word in the email felt like a hard punch to my stomach. I looked out the window of my apartment and saw it immediately. A sleek, black sedan with tinted windows was quietly parked right across the street. The car was completely dark and menacing. I felt a cold, terrible knot of pure fear tighten in my stomach. I was being followed. The next morning, I walked slowly into the dark, damp basement office, pretending to be completely defeated. I tried to access my old project files on the main server, hoping to find the list of the illegal subcontractors David had asked about. I typed in my password, but the computer screen immediately flashed a cruel, red error message. Access denied. Credentials permanently revoked. I was completely locked out of the official system. I felt trapped. I walked down the narrow, dark hallway, trying to look lost and unimportant. Suddenly Leo, Marcus's smug nephew who was now sitting in my huge, bright office, completely accidentally bumped into me. He gave me a very quick, strange look, and then in one smooth, quick movement, he slipped a small, folded note into the palm of my hand. He kept his eyes completely blank and walked quickly away. I hurried back down to the dark basement office, my heart pounding, and quickly unfolded the small note Leo had slipped into my hand. The note was short, simple, and completely unexpected. Fire exit. 7 p.m. I felt a wave of sharp, confused skepticism. Was this a genuine warning? Or was this a huge, cruel trap set by Marcus's smug son? I waited until 7 p.m., my nerves completely on edge. I slowly walked to the designated fire exit door. Leo was already standing there, waiting in the shadows. He looked completely different, not smug, but nervous and completely afraid. I asked him immediately if this was a trap. He shook his head quickly. He then revealed a huge, completely unexpected truth. He was not Marcus's nephew. He was Marcus's son from a secret first marriage. A fact Marcus had completely kept hidden from everyone in the company. Leo confessed that he deeply hated his father and his father's cruel, corrupt ways. He knew he was simply being groomed to be the perfect, easy fall guy. The person who would take the ultimate blame when the huge project failed. Leo then completely dropped the final, huge bombshell. He whispered, his voice trembling. "You're not the only one watching him. A huge company called Omni Developments knows everything. And they know all about you and your wire." The next day, I didn't have to look for Omni Developments. They came directly for me. A sleek, powerful corporate lawyer, a woman with sharp eyes and an expensive suit, approached me right as I was leaving the office. She didn't waste any time. She calmly confirmed that they completely knew I was wearing a wire. "We know everything, Jessica," she said smoothly. "And we know that your friend, David, works for us Omni Developments." My world completely tilted. The lawyer explained that Omni Developments was Marcus's powerful, secret partner, but they were planning a huge hostile takeover to completely seize the entire Haven project and leave Marcus completely empty-handed. She then made her dangerous, impossible offer. They would pay me a huge fortune to secretly switch sides and feed Marcus's complete plans directly to them, Omni. I stared at her, completely frozen by the huge, cold betrayal. The lawyer smiled, a cold, shark-like look. Her final words were the scariest of all. "Work with us, Jessica, or we will tell Marcus that you are a rat. You won't just be demoted, you will disappear completely." My options had completely vanished. I was trapped between two evil forces, and one of them had already betrayed me. I immediately rushed to David's apartment, my heart completely racing with panic and anger. I confronted him directly, slamming my fists on his kitchen table. "Omni Developments knows everything, David. And their lawyer said you work for them." I yelled, my voice shaking with pure fury. David never even flinched. He quickly spun a complex, highly believable story, his voice sounding completely controlled and sincere. He claimed he was completely deep undercover with Omni Developments to get to an even bigger fish than Marcus. "This goes all the way to the top of the city government, Jessica," he urged me, his eyes wide and serious. "Omni is just a small step in the huge staircase of corruption. I needed the wire to be subtle and undetectable. We must play along with them to bring down the whole system." I was completely panicked and desperate. David's story was completely convincing, and the danger from Marcus and Omni was very real. Despite the cold, sharp flicker of deceit I suddenly saw deep in David's eyes, I felt I had no other choice. I weakly nodded. I agreed to continue the dangerous game, to become Omni's puppet, while trying to secretly find a real way out. I was now caught in a terrifying, dangerous double dance. I started feeding Omni Developments small, completely curated, harmless pieces of information about Marcus's schedule and moods. I did this to make them completely trust me. But secretly, I had bought a small, second, personal device, a completely simple voice recorder, and I started recording all my meetings with the Omni lawyer on that device. I didn't trust anyone anymore. I felt like a spy in my own life, every word and movement carefully planned. The tension was completely unbearable. I knew that both Marcus and Omni were watching my every single move, waiting for me to make the smallest mistake. The pressure was enormous. Then the final, crucial test came. Marcus immediately called me into his huge, shiny office. He didn't yell. His eyes were narrowed, and his face was completely cold, like stone. "I hear you've been making new friends, Jessica," he said slowly, dragging out the words. His voice was completely menacing. He knew about my meetings with Omni. He then smiled, a horrible, fake smile. "We'll see how loyal you really are to Apex builders. Let's see how loyal you really are." Marcus's test was simple and completely terrifying. He produced a huge stack of financial papers, an invoice for the new, substandard materials that he was planning to use on the Haven project. The invoice was completely fraudulent, listing the cheap materials at the expensive price of high-grade materials. The paper trail was designed to completely cover his tracks. "Sign this, Jessica," Marcus ordered, pushing the pen and the invoice across my old desk. "As the former director of this project, your signature is completely required to authorize the funds. It's a simple final duty." I realized with a cold horror that I had absolutely no choice. Omni was watching me, waiting to see if I would comply. David was listening to my wire, waiting to see if I would follow his instructions. If I refused to sign, both Omni and Marcus would immediately know I was not a team player, and they would immediately eliminate me. I slowly picked up the pen. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. I signed my name in the blank space, authorizing the huge, fraudulent payment. I knew, in that terrifying moment, that I had just broken the law. I was now truly and completely in the trap, a full accomplice in their massive crime. I was now a complete criminal on paper. I needed the full, complete evidence to clear my name. I immediately contacted Leo, the disgruntled son, and begged him for more help. Leo quickly gave me a huge, valuable tip: an address and password for a hidden, off-book server that Marcus used to store all of his most incriminating files. I used a public computer at a quiet internet cafe to access the hidden system. The server was full of complex, encrypted files. I used Leo's password to unlock them. The files detailed the full complex planned collapse of the Haven. It was all there: the schedules for the cheap material delivery, the fake engineering reports, and a huge trove of internal chat logs. The files were all labeled with the chilling name, Project Phoenix. I worked quickly, trying to download the huge amount of data onto a small, unmarked hard drive. I was racing against the clock. I felt a huge rush of triumph and victory as the download bar slowly filled. But just as the download was almost finished, an alarm silently and completely triggered on the server. A red warning light flashed on the screen, and a clock started ticking backward. I had been detected. Panic immediately consumed me. The warning light was flashing, and the clock was ticking down. I quickly ripped the small hard drive out of the USB port, shoved it deep into my purse, and immediately ran out of the quiet internet cafe. I quickly drove straight back to the Apex Builders headquarters, knowing I had to hide the evidence immediately. As I slipped quietly into the main lobby, the office was already in complete chaos. Marcus stood in the lobby, yelling loudly at the huge security team. He was claiming a massive, fake security breach had just happened. He immediately ordered all the security guards to begin searching every single office in the building. I immediately realized he was looking for the hard drive I was holding. I ran as fast as I could back to my dark, damp basement storage room office. I had only seconds left. I looked around the small, bare room desperately. My eyes landed on an old, forgotten air vent high up on the concrete wall. I opened the small, dusty grate, shoved the hard drive deep inside, and quickly put the grate back on, just as the heavy, steel door of the basement room burst open. 3 large security guards stood there, their eyes wide and suspicious. The guards ransacked my tiny basement office, turning over all the old boxes and demanding to know what I was hiding. They found nothing. I put on my best, most confused look and simply told them I was just a quiet, demoted employee who had no idea what was happening. They finally left, angry and completely frustrated. But I was not safe. I was more terrified than ever. The massive betrayal from Omni Developments had left a cold, terrible knot in my stomach. I couldn't trust them. And I couldn't trust David. My deep paranoia completely consumed me. I sat at my computer and started running a background check on David myself. I paid a high price for an anonymous, private service. The results quickly popped up on my screen. The screen showed David's old school picture, his dates of graduation, and his past employment. But the huge final line completely shattered my hope. David had been disbarred years ago for serious ethical issues. He had never, ever worked for the Attorney General. He was a complete fraud. I stared at the screen, my heart turning completely to ice. I realized the wire he had given me was not a link to the government. It was a private, one-way surveillance feed running directly to Omni Developments. I had been their puppet the entire time, and they had been listening to my every breath. My sheer terror quickly hardened into a cold, powerful resolve. I was not a puppet. I was a counter-strike weapon. I had to turn the entire dangerous game against David and Omni. I immediately contacted David, pretending to be completely loyal and completely panicked. I told him a completely false, detailed story about an FBI raid that was supposedly scheduled for the next morning. I gave him enough false details to make the entire lie believable. My only goal was to scare Omni and make them completely expose their own weaknesses. While I was playing the loyal asset, I was frantically looking for a real federal contact. I knew David had completely lied about the Attorney General, so I targeted the most powerful federal agency I could think of, the FBI's white-collar crime unit. I searched online for the name of the head agent for the entire local unit. The name I found was Special Agent Miller. I spent hours carefully crafting a completely blind, encrypted email, making sure it was completely untraceable. I gave the email the most serious subject line I could think of. I have evidence of a conspiracy to commit mass fraud and endanger public safety. I hit send knowing this was my last, biggest, most dangerous chance. The wait was absolutely agonizing. I checked my encrypted email account every 5 minutes, my nerves completely shredded. Finally, a new email arrived. It was short, professional, and completely real. Agent Miller had replied. He immediately agreed to a secret, clandestine meeting in a safe, completely public location away from the city. I drove to the meeting spot, a small dark side street near a huge, busy bridge. Agent Miller was exactly what I had hoped for. Calm, serious, and completely professional. He listened to the entire unbelievable story, and he examined the huge evidence I had copied onto the hard drive, the full details of Project Phoenix. He immediately confirmed that the case was incredibly huge, involving hundreds of millions of dollars and serious threats to public safety. He gave me the only thing I truly needed. A promise of full immunity from prosecution for my forced signature on the fraudulent invoice, in exchange for my complete, full cooperation. I felt a sudden, huge wave of relief. The weight of the entire world seemed to lift from my shoulders. But as I walked quickly away from the quiet, dark meeting spot, I suddenly looked up. The sleek, corporate Omni Developments lawyer, the one who had tried to recruit me, was standing silently across the street, watching me with a cold, predatory stare. They knew. The sudden, cold realization that Omni Developments knew I had met the FBI sent a fresh wave of panic through me. They would not wait now. They would move quickly to completely silence me and Marcus. They immediately decided to eliminate both of us, Marcus for his ambition, and me for my dangerous knowledge. Omni quickly arranged a huge final partnership meeting between Marcus and their powerful CEO. This meeting was the final step to officially finalize their hostile takeover of the Haven project. It was the crucial moment when all the major crimes would be discussed and recorded. The stage was now completely set for the final, huge showdown. Then David, the traitor, contacted me immediately. He was still playing the role of my loyal undercover friend, but his voice was now completely tense and urgent. He delivered his final, terrible instruction to me. You're coming to the meeting, Jessica. It's in 1 hour. Your job is to wear your wire and keep Marcus calm. This is your final test of loyalty to the plan. David didn't know I was now working for the real power. I immediately rushed back to the safe house where Agent Miller and his FBI team were waiting. I explained the immediate, urgent threat, and the FBI team immediately sprung into action. Their plan was simple and extremely dangerous. I was the crucial, central piece of the sting operation. The agents carefully removed the Omni wire that David had given me, the one that had been spying on me for weeks, and they immediately replaced it with an identical-looking one. This new wire was a powerful, state-of-the-art device that fed a crystal-clear audio signal directly and exclusively to the FBI's surveillance van parked outside the building. I was the key to their entire plan. Agent Miller looked at me seriously as I secured the small, cold device. We will be listening to every single word, Jessica, he promised me, his voice low and serious. The whole SWAT team will be surrounding the building. But once you walk into that conference room and the door closes, you are completely on your own. Do not take the wire off, no matter what happens. I nodded. I was the bait. This was the ultimate, terrifying test. I stood in my quiet apartment, dressing slowly for the final, dangerous meeting. I was no longer wearing the ugly, cheap outfit of the demoted employee. I was wearing my best, most professional suit, the one that made me feel strong and completely ready. I carefully secured the tiny, new FBI wire under my expensive blazer, feeling the cold metal press against my chest. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't see the terrified, betrayed woman from the basement storage room anymore. I saw a weapon, completely calm and completely focused. I was ready to face the criminals who had tried to completely destroy me. I picked up my purse and walked slowly to the door. My phone suddenly buzzed with a new text message. It was from Leo, the nephew son. The message was short and completely chilling. My father is armed. He brought a small handgun. Be careful, Jessica. My blood ran cold, but I didn't stop. I simply secured my jacket, took a deep breath, and walked out of the apartment. I had to finish this. The final meeting was held in a huge, expensive, completely soundproof conference room high up in a tall, secure building in the financial district. I walked in, immediately followed by a nervous, suspicious Marcus. The Omni executives and their cold, sleek lawyer were already sitting at the huge table. The tension in the quiet room was thick enough to cut with a sharp knife. Marcus was clearly completely suspicious of my presence. He looked at me with open, cold hatred. The Omni executives looked at me with cold, predatory curiosity, wondering how much I truly knew. I sat down and kept my entire expression completely blank, my heart pounding loudly against the cold FBI wire under my jacket. The Omni CEO didn't waste any time with simple pleasantries. He smiled a huge, cruel, and completely self-satisfied grin, and looked around the room slowly. He then said the words I knew the FBI desperately needed to hear. Let's dispense with the pretenses. We're all criminals here. Let's talk about the money and the materials. The wire was live. The trap was sprung. The FBI wire was working perfectly. Marcus, completely desperate and completely unaware that the real enemy was listening, and the Omni CEO openly and calmly negotiated the huge kickbacks, the details of the substandard materials they would use, and the final, specific plan for the demolition of the haven. I sat there listening to the full, cold reality of their massive crimes, feeling a mixture of pure terror and pure triumph. The Omni CEO casually mentioned that the final stage of their plan included the elimination of liabilities. As he said the terrible word, both he and Marcus completely glanced at me, their eyes cold and empty. I knew they were talking about my death. Then, the tense conversation suddenly exploded. Marcus stood up, slamming his hand hard on the smooth table. He looked completely enraged and completely paranoid. I want a bigger cut, Omni. You're trying to cut me out. He yelled loudly, his voice shaking. Or I will take the whole thing public and completely sink us all. He was desperate and completely reckless, making the perfect recorded confession. The Omni CEO didn't look worried at all. He just sat there, completely calm, and started to laugh, a low, cold, cruel sound that completely filled the silent room. He then completely revealed his powerful hand. You think you have any leverage, Marcus? The CEO sneered. He then quickly revealed that they had Marcus's entire plan, every single detail and document, thanks to their asset. The Omni CEO then did the most terrifying thing of all. He pressed a small button on a tiny device and played a small, clear audio clip of my first, terrified recorded confession to David. The one where I had completely revealed all of Marcus's secrets. We have been playing you both from the beginning, the CEO said with a huge, cruel smile. Jessica was our ear, and you, Marcus, were just our huge, greedy distraction. Marcus's eyes completely glazed over. He slowly turned his head toward me, the terror on his face quickly twisting into a mask of pure, absolute rage. He pointed a shaking finger at me, his voice a low, strangled whisper. You're the one who completely ruined everything. You betrayed me. The revelation immediately plunged the room into a deep, terrible chaos. Marcus was completely cornered and completely enraged. His mind snapped. He reached slowly under his expensive suit jacket and slowly pulled out a small, black handgun. The Omni executives immediately dove under the huge table, screaming in pure terror. I knew I was completely seconds away from being shot, but I stood my ground. I had to keep Marcus talking for the FBI wire. Marcus, stop. It wasn't me. I yelled, my voice ringing with complete authority. Omni set us both up. They lied to me and they lied to David. They were just using us to get to you. The sound of my voice seemed to pierce through his rage. He hesitated for just a moment, completely confused. In that crucial small silence, the entire room was suddenly filled with a loud, blaring, undeniable sound. The deep, powerful sound of sirens filling the air outside. The sound grew louder and louder. The huge building was immediately surrounded. The sound of the sirens was immediately followed by a loud, massive, violent crash. The FBI SWAT team completely breached the soundproofed conference room door. guns raised and ready. The room was immediately filled with bright lights and loud, shouting commands. Marcus, completely frozen by the huge, sudden force, immediately dropped his small gun. The agents quickly moved in. Marcus, the Omni CEO, and their entire legal team were all immediately arrested at gunpoint. The dramatic, audio recording of the entire meeting was completely flawless. The full, open confession of massive fraud was now in the hands of the federal government. The years of complex corruption were completely over in one massive, loud burst of energy. As Agent Miller calmly led me out of the demolished room, my head spinning with the adrenaline, I immediately looked around for the only person missing. David. He was completely nowhere to be found. He had used the sheer, initial chaos and confusion of the arrest to quietly and expertly escape the building before the police could seal off the area. The scandal was enormous and completely dominated the entire national news cycle for weeks. The stock of Apex Builders completely plummeted to zero, and the company was immediately shut down. I was immediately hailed across the entire country as a major public hero. The brave small whistleblower who brought down a huge, powerful web of corruption and saved a city from a dangerous, failed construction project. But I felt hollow inside. I had done the right thing, but the constant feeling of paranoia and betrayal lingered. The true criminal was still out there. David, the traitor, was completely gone, and I knew he was still a serious threat. A week later, I received another huge, official-looking envelope. It was from the desperate, surviving Apex Builders Board of Directors. They were terrified of the public reaction and the coming lawsuits. They urgently requested a completely urgent meeting with me. I knew exactly what they wanted. The meeting with the remaining, terrified board members was deeply uncomfortable. They looked pale, exhausted, and completely desperate to escape the massive, huge scandal. They immediately made me a staggering offer. They were willing to sacrifice everything to save a small piece of the company's reputation. They offered me Marcus's old job, the powerful position of CEO, and a massive 7-figure salary. They even offered me a powerful seat on the board to officially lead their ethical reform and win back the completely damaged public trust. They were trying to use my clean name to completely cleanse the huge, dirty reputation of the corporation. I looked at their pleading, desperate faces. They were still more worried about money and public relations than the actual crime. I needed time to process this huge offer and decide what my own future would be. I stood up slowly, calmly looking at each one of them. "Thank you for the huge, generous offer," I said slowly, letting the final words hang in the tense air. "I'll need to think about it for a few days." While I was considering the board's massive, tempting offer, Agent Miller contacted me with a huge piece of news. He explained that because of the sheer scale of the fraud, the huge amount of public funds involved in the Haven project, and my complete full cooperation, I was now officially eligible for a massive, multi-million-dollar whistleblower reward from the federal government. The money was a huge amount, far more than I had ever dreamed of earning in my entire lifetime. It was true financial freedom. The official check arrived a few days later, delivered by a quiet, serious courier. It was a huge, impossible number written on the paper. I sat at my small, dark basement desk, staring at the check, the sun streaming through the tiny, dirty window. It was the complete, ultimate reward for my courage. But I felt a strange, cold hollowness in my hands. The money was real, but the true victory wasn't just about the cash. It was about something much deeper, rebuilding my entire life and stopping the powerful corruption. I held the check, completely unfeeling, knowing the real work was about to begin. I called the desperate board members back immediately. The decision was final and clear. I completely declined their offer to be the new CEO. I told them simply that they needed to truly earn back the public's trust by working honestly and ethically, and that they needed to do it without my help. I was not there to simply patch up their old, corrupt system. I had a different, completely huge plan. A plan that required my own company, my own leadership, and my own complete independence. I picked up my phone immediately. The first person I called was Leo, Marcus's smart, completely honest son, who had saved me with his valuable tip. The second person I called was Sarah, the terrified junior accountant who had left me the first crucial note. I spoke with them, my voice full of calm, powerful conviction. I told them both my plan. I'm starting my own firm, I declared. A company built completely on trust and absolute honesty. I want you both to come with me. We will build a better foundation. 1 year passed quickly. My new consulting firm, called Integrity Consulting, was already completely thriving. We specialized in helping major corporations build strong, ethical frameworks and completely open, safe whistleblower programs. Leo was my brilliant, hardworking operations chief, and Sarah was my trusted chief financial officer. We were a huge success. I was finally the master of my own destiny, creating real, powerful change, not just collecting a salary. I sat in my new bright office, a huge corner room with large, beautiful windows that looked out over the entire city. It was the office I had always deserved. I was checking the news when a small news alert suddenly flashed on my phone screen. The headline was simple and completely satisfying. David, the traitor, had been quickly captured in a small foreign country. He was being immediately extradited back to the United States to face his serious justice charges for the long list of crimes he had committed while working for Omni Developments. My final, small piece of unfinished business had been peacefully and finally resolved. I stood up from my desk and walked slowly to the huge, beautiful window of my new office. I looked down at the sprawling, bustling city below. I could clearly see the construction site of the Haven project. It was being rebuilt, properly this time, with high-quality materials and honest labor, all under the ethical supervision of Integrity Consulting. I hadn't just gotten simple revenge on Marcus and Omni. I had completely built something new and strong from the cold rubble of the old, terrible corruption. I had not been defeated by the greedy men who tried to silence me. I had used their own darkness to create a new, powerful light for myself and for the city. The name of my new firm was a promise, a beacon of hope. They tried to bury me in the basement. I thought, a small, triumphant smile playing on my lips. They didn't realize they were simply giving me the blueprint to build a better foundation. Do not forget to like and subscribe to this channel for more.